Today at the National Press Club, Minister for Climate Change and Energy Chris Bowen. He'll explore how Australia can fortify its energy grid and economy from uncertainty. Chris Bowen with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and today's Westpac address. My name's Tom Connell. I'm the club's president and also an anchor at News 24. And our speaker today is Chris Bowen, Minister for Climate Change and Energy. His theme, energy security in an uncertain world. Uncertainty doing a little bit of heavy lifting there. We've got fuel security thrust into the spotlight amidst the now 6-month war in Iran, which I read again today is about to end. Power-hungry data centres popping up around the nation with the AI revolution in full throttle. And energy experts adamant the government will not, as it stands, achieve its aim of 43% emissions reductions by 2030. The Minister might like to address that if he would like to. I remind our members the club will have a podcast of this address on our website later today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Minister, Chris Bowen.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for joining me on the lands of the Ngambri and Ngunnawal people, whose elders I acknowledge and celebrate. Well, this speech is in Canberra, but it's not about Canberra. Today I want to talk about the regions and suburbs of Australia and what they're doing to reduce their bills, their emissions, and improve Australia's energy security in these uncertain times. You might have heard of the suburb of Tarneit. It's 30 kilometres west of Melbourne. While you may have heard of it, I doubt you've heard its remarkable story. It's not a woke inner-city enclave. People there are not at the top of the income scale. It's in the federal electorate of Layla. Tarneit is quintessential suburban Australia. Tarneit might be an ordinary Australian suburb, but it tells a very special story. You see, of all the suburbs in Australia, it's Tarneit which has taken up the government's cheaper home battery policy with the most enthusiasm. And something else. It's also the suburb in Australia with the highest take-up of our EV tax discount. Now, that isn't a coincidence. It's our policies working together as intended. People getting a battery and then maximising their contribution to their cost of living by powering their EV at a rate much cheaper than filling up at the servo. But there's also a deeper story. As impressive as Tarneit's story is, it's reflective of the suburbs right across our capital cities and also our regions. People who are undertaking a common sense revolution every day. While I'm sure the people of Tarneit and similar suburbs are pleased that they're playing their part in reducing Australia's emissions, I actually doubt that it's their main overriding motivating factor. In fact, they know that getting solar, getting a battery, getting an EV reduces their costs. They know that EVs are cheaper to run and shields them against global oil shocks. They know that what is good for the planet is good for their pocket too. Now, despite all the noise of the Coalition and the Liberals, the Nationals and the One Nation, despite the wall of climate denial and negativity which finds its home in some opinion pages in Australia, despite the loud attempts to ride the algorithms of social media to stop the transition, the quiet majority of Australians are simply getting on with it. The Australian people have expressed their views in two ways. In May last year, they expressed it by rejecting the plan to slow down our transition to renewable energy and wait for the most expensive form of energy, nuclear. And they're also expressing it every single day in the choices they're making to install solar, batteries and buy EVs. The common sense choices that Australians are making to upgrade their own energy infrastructure with modern, reliable renewables is the same as our approach for the country. When the Straits of Hormuz closed, politicians on the right wing said rationing was inevitable, and in some cases they demanded it immediately. We had the view that a calmer, more sensible approach was necessary. And as a result, Australia has more fuel today than we did when Iran was first bombed. I know the opposition is disappointed about that. Their breathless scaremongering has been proven to be exactly what it was. But I think the average Aussie thinks that's a pretty good outcome. While working hard in recent months to ensure our fuel security in these uncertain times, we've also taken the approach of securing fuel now while supporting less fuel use into the future. We're working to develop Australia's low-carbon liquid fuel industry, for example, with consultation on how to create a market to foster more domestic production underway, with more to do. Making cleaner fuel here in Australia from Australian feedstock will back our innovators and support our farmers, from farmer to the fuel bowser, and make fuel supply cleaner and more secure, as well as providing a pathway for industries that are hard to abate. We've also backed Australians in their choices to buy electric vehicles through our electric vehicle tax cut and the new vehicle efficiency standards. And they've taken that option up with alacrity. In the first 6 months of this year, EVs and plug-in hybrids accounted for 27%, or about 191,830 of light vehicle sales. That's up from 13.1% in the 2025 calendar year. And again, the roll call of suburbs that have taken up our electric vehicle tax cut reads like a TripAdvisor of the outer suburbs of our capital cities. Suburbs like Tarneit, Werribee, Kellyville, Marsden Park, Craigieburn, Cranbourne and Baulkham Hills. And just like households are investing in new energy fit-outs for their modern purposes, so is the country as a whole. A little over 2 years ago, I stood here at the National Press Club and shared a key fact. I told this room, that in the year before the speech, not a single day had passed without a coal-fired power station somewhere in the national energy market breaking down without notice. Not one day. Today, 2 years later, I can report back. In 2 years since, the same thing. Not a single day. Not one. 3 years in a row. Every single day, a coal outage, unexpected, has occurred somewhere in our grid. In the first quarter of this year, average daily coal outages increased by 23% across Queensland, New South Wales and Victoria, compared to the first quarter of 2025. In Queensland, the increase in outages rose 84%. Coal isn't baseload anymore. It's an unreliable asset. Every time coal breaks down, your bills go up. Now, there are good men and women working very hard in the regions to keep our coal-fired power stations working. It's not their fault. It's simply the matter of economics and engineering. As an asset gets older, it gets less reliable. Our coal assets are ageing. The average age of our coal-fired power stations in the national energy grid is now 38 years. They need to be replaced with new modern energy. Now, some want to sweat these assets for longer. Some want to rely on them more, not less, to ignore the reality and mislead the Australian people. That's a recipe for unreliability, for blackouts, and for increased bills. We have a different plan. To replace these ageing coal-fired power stations with new, abundant renewable energy backed by storage and gas peaking. And while, of course, like any transition, we face our fair share of challenges and headwinds, they're not unique to Australia's energy transition. As the economics of big batteries have improved, for example, this together with falling wholesale energy prices and rising costs of wind turbines has seen that wind farms have found it harder to reach final investment decision. In addition, decisions by the Queensland Government to create sovereign risk by withdrawing support for previously approved wind farms are not in the interests of Queenslanders or Australians, and they make our national transition harder. Despite this, our transition is progressing well. In May 2022, our national grid was about a third renewables. In the last quarter of 2025, it hit 50%, and each quarter of 2026 has seen new records broken. The pace of our energy transition will only serve to further insulate us from the global energy insecurity, which is not getting any better. In the last financial year, over 8 gigawatts of large-scale renewable energy and storage was connected to the grid. Not planned, not announced, connected, up and running. That's double the previous financial year, with a further 3.4 gigawatts of solar added on the rooftops of Australian houses and small businesses. Renewable records were broken again in the last quarter, with wind up 20% in the same period last year, large-scale solar up 12%, while coal was down 5% and gas down 30%. As a result, wholesale spot prices averaged $74 a megawatt hour, down 47% from the same period a year earlier. the lowest second quarter average in 6 years. But the real standout is the Australian battery story. Now, some of you know I don't need that much encouragement to talk about it, particularly about the suburban uptake. But what I think a lot of people may not have fully appreciated yet is just how globally significant our battery story is. The take-up of nearly 2,000 batteries each and every working day across our country. In the last year, in just 1 year, Australian households and small businesses have installed 13 gigawatt hours of small-scale battery storage through the Cheaper Home Battery program. Sounds like a reasonable amount. Well, let's put it in perspective. The United States installed 3.1 gigawatt hours of residential storage in all of 2025, bringing its total residential capacity to 9 gigawatt hours. So in the last 12 months, Australians have installed more home battery capacity in 1 year than the United States of America has installed in its history. Another comparison. And last year, the entire European Union added 12.3 gigawatt hours of residential battery storage. A good figure, Your Excellency, a very good figure. But Europe's a bit bigger than Australia when it comes to population. So we're doing well by comparison. In 2025, Australia ranked second only to Germany for new residential battery capacity, and in 2026, we are forecast clearly to be number one in the world. The Cheaper Home Batteries policy has been a remarkable success. The government helped remove that last barrier, and Australians have responded. Now, I've talked about Tarneit, but there's plenty of other examples. There are now 5 federal electorates where more than 10% of the houses in those electorates have installed cheaper home batteries. Mitchell, Greenway and Hume in New South Wales, Mayo in South Australia and Wright in Queensland. Now, anyone who tells you that the people of the outer suburbs and regions don't support the energy transition have fundamentally misread those communities. And here's the other thing. The battery revolution in Australia is reducing prices for everyone. The first quarter of this year saw the lowest gas use in our energy system in 26 years, and the second quarter, the lowest quarterly gas result since 2003. Now, gas, of course, remains essential for our industries in particular. But for too many years, despite Australia being one of the world's largest gas producers, we've faced warnings of shortfalls. So that's why we're working to deliver the Australian Domestic Gas Reservation, to ensure we have the affordable gas we need here while remaining a reliable trading partner. But it's also true that gas is playing less and less of a role in our electricity system as batteries play more and more, freeing up some of that gas for industry. Batteries now set the price more than a third of the time compared to just 13% just a year ago. And they're now setting the price, of course, lower than gas would have. This has played no small role in getting us to the situation where wholesale prices are now. The International Energy Agency recently reported that Australia is one of the few countries in the world currently experiencing reductions in our wholesale energy prices in the midst of another global energy crisis. And they call out the reason for that: renewables and batteries. So this is good progress. Of course, to be frank, there are some elements of the transition where we are facing headwinds. While neither hydrogen or offshore wind play a role in our 82% target, the cost curve for both hasn't come down as quickly as was predicted a few years ago. Having said that, last month we did see Australia's biggest commercial-scale hydrogen project, Orica's Kooragang Island, take its final investment decision integrating renewable hydrogen with ammonia manufacturing. Globally, low-emissions hydrogen production did grow 20% in 2025, with progress occurring mainly in Europe and China. Likewise, offshore wind has faced structural constraints around the world, which has made starting this industry from scratch in Australia harder than it otherwise would have been. Now, some like to point to these challenges to discount the transition. I see it differently. The cost curve coming down isn't always linear, and it isn't always exactly as predicted. We're focused on delivering our 2030 targets while keeping our eye on the horizon and over the horizon on other developments for the future. So progress is good, but there's always more to do. The lesson from the Cheaper Home Batteries policy and EVs policy for me is clear. With the right policy settings, Australians will respond enthusiastically in ways which can add up to a globally significant outcome. When asking what more we can do, the key is identifying the gaps in progress. So utility solar is going well. Rooftop solar continues to break records each month. But to be frank, there is a missing middle in Australia's energy transition. Now, many of you in this room have to spend time on aeroplanes for work. You might have noticed when you come into land the prevalence of solar on residential rooftops. More solar panels, more houses in Australia have solar panels than have backyard swimming pools. But you may also have noticed that many warehouses and factory roofs are devoid of solar panels or only have panels on a fairly small percentage of their roof space. This is the missing middle, that is mid-scale solar. Factories, warehouses, farming sheds, large industrial premises, big empty roof space, ripe for solar generation. The data backs this up. According to the Institute for Energy Economics and Financial Analysis, while Australia's residential solar is sitting at 22 gigawatts, businesses have only installed around 5.6 gigawatts. Estimates vary, but the technical rooftop potential for solar on commercial, industrial and agricultural rooftops could exceed 80 gigawatts. That is an opportunity we should miss no longer. Part of the reason why those warehouses with solar panels usually only have a fairly small proportion covered with solar panels is that the Small-Scale Renewable Energy Scheme, SRES, has so successfully supported so many houses, but it caps out currently with a maximum support for 100 kilowatts. That's more than enough for a house, but it's not much when it comes to a factory. So today I announce that we are expanding the solar discount to include installations of up to 1 megawatt in size. This will slash the installation costs. This will slash the installation costs for commercial, industrial and agricultural buildings by around 20%. That's a significant saving on an investment that will immediately begin lowering the cost of energy for those companies and businesses. Take, for example, the installation of a 250 kilowatt solar system on a medium-sized enterprise like a retailer. Upfront, they could save around $68,000 on installation. Going forward, they could be generating around 345 megawatt hours of electricity each year with a potential saving of $50,000 in annual electricity costs. A larger operation might opt for an 850 kilowatt system. That's enough to support a large manufacturing facility or a retail complex or a logistics warehouse. The upfront discount for them will be around $230,000. And each year they'd be generating 1,173 megawatt hours, seeing savings of around $175,000 in their energy bill. Good for them, good for their customers. This isn't just about energy bills, it's good for productivity, freeing up capital to invest back into their business in other ways. In addition, many businesses have told me that if they are inclined to install rooftop solar, they've encountered delays in getting their network service provider to approve the installation. So while I understand these are complex questions that need to be worked through, many of the delays I have heard about are simply unacceptable and make it hard for businesses that are trying to do the right thing and install solar. They just give up. So I want to end that roadblock as well. So today, I'm announcing that I'm requesting the Australian Energy Market Commission to consider a rule change that will require the network providers to approve commercial and industrial solar much more expeditiously and efficiently than they have been doing. I look forward to this rule change request receiving positive consideration by the AEMC. And together, with our 20% discount on commercial and industrial solar, it could play a significant role in driving Australia's renewable take-up. Now, no discussion of Australia's electricity system and renewable take-up would be complete without dealing with the issue of data centres. The pipeline of data centre investment in Australia is very strong. Westpac estimates the pipeline of data centre investment in our country to be more than $150 billion. There are many reasons for Australia being such an attractive destination for data centre investment. I point out in passing that investors in such energy-hungry facilities wouldn't be investing in Australia if they didn't have confidence in our energy system and our reliable renewable energy. But there is a concern in the community that the strong pipeline of data centre investment in Australia might push up prices or put us off track for our renewable energy goals. I understand those concerns, and absent the right policy response, I share them. Data centres are huge consumers of electricity. They are whales. In 2024, data centres in the United States consumed as much electricity as Sweden did. The energy market operator AEMO tells us that data centres currently consume 2% of our electricity. They expect that to grow to 6% in 2030 and 10% in 2050. To put those figures in context, 6% is the equivalent to the energy use of every home in Victoria. Take the proposed Mamre Road data centre, which is in my own electorate, 15 minutes from where I live in Western Sydney. It would be one of the biggest data centres in the world. Its peak electricity use would be in line with New South Wales's biggest current user of electricity, the Tomago aluminium smelter. So clearly, we have issues to manage. While I share the concerns of those who worry about the energy and water use of data centres, I also see opportunities as well as challenges. AI and climate change are the defining issues of our time. The right policy can ensure they help each other. Now, a hands-off, let-her-rip approach, a race to the bottom for investment, would be a disaster. Let me be clear on behalf of the government. We welcome data centre investment, but only if it is in the best interests of our country. The Prime Minister, Minister Ayres, Assistant Minister Charlton and I are clear about the principles that underpin our approach. Data centres are welcome if they bring their own additional renewable energy. In coming weeks, the Prime Minister will outline more details to our approach. Many of the building blocks that will complement the national minimum requirements are coming into place. Already, the Commonwealth has worked with the states and market bodies on a change to our energy rules to ensure that the costs of connecting data centres to the grid are not passed on to households. This proposed rule change will introduce a causer pays principle. If you cause the cost, you'll pay the cost. It means that if data centres and other energy users need new or accelerated transmission, they'll foot the bill. This is a forward-leaning step. No other country has mandated cost protections for households in this way. Now, that's very important, but it's not enough. Last week, we took the crucial step as the Commonwealth, states and territories, as we agreed on a new slate of measures backed up by the Energy Market Rulemaker, the AEMC, which I'll take you through today. Firstly, we'll use the Renewable Electricity Guarantee of Origin scheme to drive investment in renewable energy. The existing Guarantee of Origin scheme tracks and verifies the origin of renewable energy through digital certificates. Data centres will be mandated through our national AI standard to get these certificates from renewable energy generators and to prove they are fully offsetting their power use with renewable energy that may otherwise not have been built. Importantly, this scheme will be flexible with multiple ways for data centres to meet their obligations to allow the market to determine the lowest cost approach. For example, data centres could sign power purchase agreements, PPAs, or invest in their own renewable generation directly. An agreement from a proposed wind farm, for example, that may have received support under the Capacity Investment Scheme or a similar state scheme and environmental approvals but has not yet reached final investment decision could qualify as new additional renewable energy. Secondly, data centres must prove they have enough firmed power to back them up, strengthening the stability of the energy grid, not weakening it. Similarly, to proving where their energy comes from, data centres will have to prove that they have enough firmed, stable energy to cover their load. We are working to ensure large AI data centres work flexibly by reducing their power consumption when needed to help stabilise the grid on rare occasions. This can offer important benefits to consumers as well. And finally, we're encouraging other measures to strengthen the grid, including offering data centres fast-tracked options where they can co-locate with existing generation, minimising the need for new transmission and distribution. I want to be clear. These changes have one clear test to meet. We want an energy system that is stronger and doesn't cost consumers more. That's the test we've set, and that's the one we'll hold to. Because the argument I really want to answer today is a bigger one. There are those, both on the left and the right, some in the media, have said Australia needs to choose. Build renewable energy or build the AI industry. protect households and bills, or attract investment. That something has to give. Our targets, household bills, or both. I don't accept that. I don't agree with that, and the evidence doesn't support it either. Data centres need exactly what renewables, backed by storage and gas peaking, deliver. Power at scale. Power that is stable. Power that isn't hostage to fuel prices set on the other side of the world. Renewables need what data centres bring: certainty, investment and load that can bend to when the grid needs it to. So data centres are not a challenge to 82%. Handled well, they help us get there. Now, I appreciate the states and territories working with us and the AEMC to implement these reforms. But let me be very blunt and very frank. It was not unanimous at the Energy Ministers' Council. Let me be equally frank. While I always prefer to work with my state and territory colleagues, the Commonwealth will not be standing by and letting a race to the bottom of states falling over themselves to attract data centres at the cost of household bills, reliability or emissions. We will use all the power available to the Commonwealth, including Commonwealth legislation, to ensure that Australian households and Australian energy reliability is put first, even if some states have different ideas. At the same time, these new rules will be a national standard. States and territories will be free to add more rigorous requirements if they feel that's appropriate to their circumstances, but not to water them down. Now, friends, whether it's data centres, renewable rollout, tackling climate change generally, Australia is not alone in facing these challenges as a country. As our opponents like to parrot, we are about 1% of global emissions. But this year, Australia is stepping up to play a broader role as President of negotiations for COP31, enabling us to guide and steer the conversation around 90% of the world's emissions. Earlier this year, Mark Carney gave a terrific speech, lauded around the world, about the role of middle powers in such an uncertain time, something Australia has been saying similarly for some time. Now, in jointly delivering COP31 with the Pacific and with Turkey, Australia is stepping up with Turkey to play that middle power role in the very best way. And let me take this opportunity to welcome to Australia and to the lunch the Chief Executive of COP31, the Deputy Minister for Climate Change of Turkey, Fatma Varank. I'm very glad that you could join us today, and you are very welcome in our country. And I also take this opportunity of recognising my own Special Envoy, Kate Thwaites, who's playing an important role internationally and domestically on my behalf. Thank you, Kate. Now, of course, these issues are particularly important in our region. The impacts of climate change are the number 1, 2 and 3 issues for the Pacific Islands. They look to Australia for leadership, and under this government we will reciprocate with action. Now, this is not without controversy domestically. By opposing Australia playing this role, opposing the hosting of pre-COP in Fiji, our political opponents are making clear they would revert to the Morrison-Dutton tin ear approach to the Pacific's most defining issue. A few weeks ago, the Shadow Minister for Foreign Affairs stood at this podium where I'm standing today and said, and I quote, "No matter who is the government of Australia, we will always seek to be the Pacific's most trusted partner." Well, to be very blunt, while his party engages in the politics of delay and denial, while they oppose and mislead about the unparalleled opportunity to lift Pacific issues to the global stage through COP31 and pre-COP in Fiji, these are cheap and dishonest words. Chairing COP negotiations isn't easy. I've seen that up close and personal in recent years. But it's important. It's an important and remarkable opportunity for our country to tell our story, to attract investment, to build deeper and meaningful bilateral links when it's never been more important, particularly with our friends and partners and collaborators in Turkey. This year's COP comes in arguably the most complicated and geopolitical environment we have faced in many years. But it comes at a time also when countries around the world have reached the same conclusion as the good people of Tarneit. The same people as Werribee and Craigieburn have all grappled with the issues of the Straits of Hormuz energy crisis, and they've all come to the same conclusion. Good climate policy is good energy security policy as well. Building renewables more into your household, in your country, improves your energy security. The sun can't be blockaded. The wind can't be sanctioned. We'll be continuing to work with Turkey, with our Pacific family, with the broader international community for a good, strong outcome at COP31. Our preparations are in good shape, and there's real momentum, particularly around the electrification agenda that we and Turkey have been proposing. Just as we've been catching up quickly, as quickly as we can, on a decade of denial and delay in Australia, so our international engagement has seen Australia move from being isolated in international climate negotiations to chairing those negotiations. Ladies and gentlemen, giving regular and frank updates to the Australian people, including in our annual climate statement to Parliament, has been an important part of our approach since we took office. When we came to office, renewable energy was 33% of our grid. Now it's 50%. Some elements of our transition are going extremely well. Rooftop solar installations continue to smash records month after month. Our achievements on batteries, big and small, are genuinely world-leading. But there are opportunities in the challenges as well, which our government is seizing, to find ways to make our data centres a spur to new investment in new renewable energy and to back our businesses and farmers who want to put their roof space to work and reduce their bills and emissions and show that we will keep the course. I know the people of suburbs like Tarneit, all around Australia, are with us on that journey. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Minister. We've had a situation previously in Australia where solar panel take-up was so successful there was sort of excess power. The batteries came along, the subsidised batteries, and were seen to soak that up. If you address this missing middle, factories, businesses and so on, and that's successful because that's just focusing on solar panels, couldn't we go back to that imbalance of too much solar, and what would you do about that?
It's a fair question, Tom, but I think the conclusion is not that, for two reasons. I think that would be a fair criticism if we didn't have such a big take-up of batteries, that world-leading battery take-up, which will complement the improved and increased solar take-up. Point number one. Second point, the difference between houses and businesses in many instances, not all, but many, is that houses generate a lot of power during the middle of the day and use a lot of power at night. That's the duck curve that we've been flattening, working to flatten. Whereas a lot of businesses haven't been generating much power in the middle of the day, but use a lot of power. And so, for example, this morning I was at a very large, great Canberra business, Go Troppo, the fruit wholesalers. They've got cold rooms, warm rooms. They are big energy users. They've got 100 kilowatts on their roof, and they've reduced their energy bills by $40,000, but they still use more energy than they generate. Now, they will obviously, they've told me, they'll take up this scheme and they'll get more solar panels on their roofs. They'll be calling less on the grid in the middle of the day when they're working. They don't work at night so much. Now, it's not the case for every business, but it's the case for a lot of businesses, that they're very active in the middle of the day when we have a lot of power. They're not so active in the evening when households are active. So actually, they'll help us balance the grid and move away. A very big task for a country so reliant on solar panels. You're right about the issue, the duck curve of generating a lot of power in the middle of the day and using it at night. That's why wholesale prices at night are traditionally so high. And we're actually seeing a lot of the reductions in wholesale prices that we're seeing are coming from reducing that nighttime peak. And I think this scheme will help us with that ongoing task.
So is it a watch, though, that surplus possibility?
Well, again, we're soaking up more of that surplus through batteries. We've got the solar share offer, which is encouraging people. It's early days, but it's encouraging people where they can. Not everyone can, but, you know, quite a lot can. Move power use from the night time to the middle of the day. If you work from home, you're a retired couple, or you've got smart apps, you can do that. It'll take some time for that to roll out properly and people to decide whether they want to take up that option, but it's all part of the mix. And I think getting more solar panels on those massive rooftops in Australia is part of the solution, not part of the problem.
First question from the floor, Elizabeth Pike from The Australian.
Thank you very much, Tom, and thank you, Mr Bowen, for your time today. You said household power prices would fall by $275. They didn't. You said you would reach the 82% renewable target. That task looks very difficult. Will it be on you if Labor fails to meet any more of its climate action KPIs in the next 4 years?
Well, I mean, as I said, thank you for the question, Elizabeth. But as I said, we are making very good progress on many elements of our transition. There's others where we're facing headwinds, which we've always been frank about. We've faced international circumstances of now 2 global energy shocks in our 4 years, which is historically our high proportion. Australians knew that in 2025. They knew what we'd said in 2022. They knew our record, and they asked us to keep going. And as I said, we accept that mandate. Obviously, if you ask the question, is it on me? Yes, that's my job. I'm not famous for walking away from my responsibilities. I run into them, embrace them, and do my best to deliver on them.
Many consumers are still concerned they're facing higher power bills. What do you say to them, given that mandate that they gave you?
They're right. They're right to be concerned about high power. Power bills are higher than we would like, higher than I would like. The answer to that is to work hard every day to get them down. And we're seeing progress on wholesale prices. Most Australians don't pay wholesale prices. Some do. You can choose to pay wholesale prices. Most Australians pay retail prices. We've got more work to do through rule changes and working with industry to ensure that flows through, but most importantly, to ensure it keeps going. Now, there's an alternative approach: to stop, to get off, to rely more on the unreliable coal, which sees bills go up, or to somehow, in a fantasy world, bring nuclear into Australia in some realistic timeline, which is the most expensive form of energy available. That is not the answer to high bills. So every election's a contest. The next election will be a contest on energy. I remember Peter Dutton saying one of the last election to be a referendum on energy. That was okay with us. If they want the next election to be a referendum on energy, that's okay too, because our plan is ultimately the only one on offer to the Australian people that can reduce bills. Their plan will make electricity more expensive.
Thank you very much.
Ryan Crop from the AFR.
Thank you, Minister. You've spoken at length today about the government's plans to require data centres to use renewable energy to power their operations. Now, you've said that you're going to force non-compliant states to play along with this. Now, Queensland and the Northern Territory have been very clear that they don't intend to go along with this. You may, by the time these rules come into place, have a very different Victorian government in place. How do you intend to enforce this? And you mentioned the powers available to the government. What are those powers? Could you provide some more detail on that?
Thanks for the question, Ryan. I'm not sure I said we'd force them to comply. I said we would proceed. And, you know, the energy ministers voted 7 votes to 2 to proceed. I welcome that. But we're clear. We'll engage in our levers. The clearest one is obviously Commonwealth legislation. We said we're going down that road. The Constitution is pretty clear about any conflict between Commonwealth legislation and state legislation and which legislation prevails. Also, we're sending rule requests to the Energy Market Commission. Any minister, any person can send a rule request to the Energy Commission. That's what we're doing. That doesn't require unanimity around the states. The only thing that would require unanimity from the states and territories is a national energy law change. That'd be great if we had it. We don't, so we will do it other ways. But as I said, with all due, I much prefer to work with state jurisdictions. I work very well with, for example, Tasmania, who supported our changes. I worked well with the previous coalition government in New South Wales. I'd be happy to work with a government that, you know, is helping with the transition. But if a government thinks that they're going to undermine other states with some sort of race to the bottom, those states have views and we have views, and we won't let that happen. And that's not in the best interest of Queensland consumers. Queensland consumers, it's not in their best interest to see data centres come up with no requirements on them and see them force up energy bills. So we're on the side of those Queenslanders and Australians who want to see that data centre investment work for Australia and in our national interest.
The state governments run their own power grids. Are you saying you will write Commonwealth legislation to effectively force Queensland to run their power grid in a certain way?
I'm saying we'll write Commonwealth legislation for the Commonwealth of Australia, which covers every state and territory.
Thanks.
Romy Stevens from the ABC.
Thank you, Minister, for your address today. Australia's struggling to attract the investment needed to reach the 82% renewable energy target by 2030. This coming at a time when the government unveils plans to transition to a 30% capital gains tax on foreign investors from 2030. Are those tax changes sending a signal that global investors should think twice before coming to Australia? And has there been any modelling done on what impact this will have on Australia's renewable energy targets?
Thanks, Romy. As I said in my speech, there are some large-scale investments which are finding it difficult to get to final investment decision, most particularly wind. I mean, utility solar and batteries is going very well. they're reaching final investment decision. A combination of factors is making it harder for wind. The fact that wholesale prices are falling means return on investment is lower. I see that as a good thing, but it's still something which has to be worked through, and the costs of producing wind have not fallen like the cost of solar and batteries have. So I would say, there are some areas where it is the case that we need to work harder to get more investment. There's other areas where it's going very well. In relation to your specific question about capital gains tax, that was announced in various budgets. The Treasurer has been consulting with the renewable energy sector. I know he'll continue to. He continues to consult with me. I welcome that. Obviously, he's indicated he wants to continue to have a sensible conversation. The renewable energy sector, in turn, has recognised that change does need to happen, and those conversations will continue.
Is there any scope to push that deadline out to 2050 to better align with the renewable energy transition? Would that have too big of an impact on the budget?
I don't think we're going to start, the conversation with the renewable sector here at this podium between you and I. I think the Treasury has been pretty clear about what the government's trying to do. The renewable energy sector, to their credit, has responded with positive conversations, and those conversations will continue.
Will you get to 82%?
Oh, I think we can. I think we can.
Rather than will?
Well, I think we can. And whether we will or not depends on whether we keep our foot on the accelerator and we keep finding new things to do, like the changes that I've announced today. I believe we can and get to 82% if we keep going. And I believe that's a good thing. And I believe if we get very close to 82%, if we get to 82% in 2031 and not 2030, that's still a very good thing. We are, to be clear, aiming and working to get to 82% by 2030. That's our intention. That's what we're working towards. Are there challenges and headwinds? Sure. Are there some things which are going spectacularly well that people didn't predict, even 18 months ago? Nobody would have predicted. And I wouldn't have been brave enough to assert that we could get more home battery capacity in Australia in a year than the United States has installed in history. I would not have come here and made that prediction or claim. But we've managed it. And those are the sorts of things that we can keep doing and give Australia the best possible chance, not only of meeting those targets, which is important for emissions, but also delivers the most reliable and the lowest cost energy system that we could possibly have in 2030.
All right.
Thank you.
Next question, Ruben Spargo from News 24.
Minister, thank you. Gina Rinehart and yourself differ on you nearly spat your water out.
Correct.
Gina
Correct.
Rinehart and yourself differ on
You're going very well so far, yes.
You differ on a range of issues, including net zero, which she opposes. You've had dealings with her dating back to Roy Hill in 2012. I'm wondering what you make of the national broadcaster's video depicting violence against her. Should it be removed from iView, and is an apology worthwhile?
So you're right, I have very strong differences of views with Mrs Rinehart about many things, most particularly climate change. I believe in it. I believe it's real. That's a key difference, and I believe we should do something about it. I haven't seen the clip that you're referring to. It's not a show that I watch, but I've read the reports, and if the reports I've read are right, which I assume they are, then it is not appropriate. It should not have aired, and the ABC should take appropriate action. But no Australian, even an Australian I profoundly disagree with, like Mrs Rinehart, should be subject to that sort of commentary.
Should the ABC apologise?
Well, again, they should take appropriate action, up to and including considering the message they should send to Mrs Rinehart. Now, I'm not on the board of the ABC. The Minister of Communications isn't even not on the board of the ABC. But I believe in decent, respectful debate and civil discourse, and that was not that. And if the clip was as I read it is, then yes, I would expect an apology.
Thank you.
Andrew Probyn from the Nine Network.
Minister, my question is about targets, but on a slightly different subject. You still have the scars and bruises of a former immigration minister. Tony Burke was meant to arrive here tomorrow. Sounds like he had a cracking cabinet meeting on Monday. I'm wondering, why is it...
Every cabinet meeting is cracking, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. This one was particularly good, I hear. Why is it that the government has consistently failed to hit your targets of 225,000 a year?
Look, Andrew, firstly, I'm not going to reveal... No journalist in this room or in this country has ever successfully got me to talk about a cabinet meeting, and I'm not about to start now.
I'm not asking that.
No, but I just put that, clearly on the record. Secondly, What Minister Burke is dealing with, and you're right, I have some experience in this matter, ministers for immigration don't always have direct levers. I mean, some of our quite a lot of our immigration program is demand-driven. You know, if a business needs a temporary skilled worker, then that is something which automatically happens. And there's things in the total net migration figures to Australia, like Australian residents returning home, as they're perfectly entitled to do. So, look, Tony's all across this. He's making good progress. He will have more to say when he's worked those issues through. He's doing a fantastic job against the face of, you know, quite remarkable populist statements from the opposition who know the truth and choose not to engage in the truth.
Do you think there's been abuse in the system on family reunion and so on?
Well, as also an MP from Western Sydney with a deeply successful multicultural community, I know that family reunion is also very important for our country. Bringing parents to Australia, for example, bringing loved ones who then go on and contribute huge amounts. Now, every program will have elements where you need to ensure compliance, of course, but the family reunion program is a very important one and a very successful one.
Okay.
Alan Ransley from the Courier Mail.
Thanks, Minister. Another policy in your portfolio you're facing pushback from the Queensland Government is the gas reservation policy. In their submission last month, they called for the policy to be reworked. They say that Queensland stands to lose because of the impact it will have to the royalty program. What are you doing to address Queensland's concerns? Would something like a GST sweetener, for example, be on the cards as Queensland has called for?
Well, as I said, thanks for the question, Alan. In one sense, this is a complicated policy area because it's deeply technical. And also, frankly, this would have been better done 20 years ago. The second best time is now. So what we're doing is retrofitting a policy on that which should have happened 20 years ago. But it has to happen now. As I said, I think Australian people scratch their head and say, how can we be one of the world's largest gas producers and have these regular forecast gas shortages forecast? And they're right. And we'll fix that. And, you know, governments of both persuasions have had to come along with ad hoc measures to try and get through short term. What Madeleine King, working with Tim Ayres, have tried to do is get rid of all that and have a consistent policy which applies across decades. Now, with all due respect to Queensland, again, I'm very happy to work with constructive state governments, but their royalty regime is not the number 1, 2 or 3 issue that the government is trying to fix here. The government's trying to fix the situation where Australian heavy industry doesn't have access or has forecast gas shortages. That's not okay. And maybe we're more concerned about that than the Queensland government is. But we are concerned about it.
James Mager from Bloomberg.
I have 2 questions, but I promise I won't follow up, so if that's okay. The first question is, on the role of gas in powering data centres, the Northern Territory government announced that they were looking at the massive data centre powered by the gas in the Beetaloo Basin. What is the role of gas in providing power for future data centres or current data centres, and will it be part of their requirements can they use gas as part of the requirements to provide firming power? And the second question is, Australian consumers, as you say, are responding to higher gas prices, petrol prices, by reducing petrol purchases. Purchases are down, every year of regular petrol. They were very low through May this year, but diesel is still rising, and I think diesel sales through May were the second highest in volume in history. Does more need to be done to encourage farmers, businesses, trucking companies, mining companies to reduce diesel usage in the way that consumers are reducing petrol usage? Thank you.
Thanks for your question. Firstly, in relation to gas and data centres, my approach here is, I think, if I could say, sensible and centrist, like my approach to gas generally. Gas has got a role to play. It's not the answer to all our problems. It's got a role to play, nor can it be gotten rid of immediately or suddenly. It supports renewables in a properly designed system. That's my view generally. Gas-fired power stations, I hope, are not turned on very often. But when they're turned on, you need them. And that's the virtue of gas, is it's very flexible in our energy system. So yes, our requirements are very clear that data centres must bring their own additional renewables. If they have sensible firming arrangements with gas as part of that, that's fine. I don't envisage it being needed very often, that's the good news. But it'll be important when it is needed. So I think that's a particularly common sense approach, that gas can be included, but it must support a clear commitment to new additional 100% renewables. In relation to your question about diesel, Australians are, reducing their liquid fuel use, absolutely. We've seen some of that start to play out. It's early days. Even with the very big increase in EV sales that we're experiencing, it will take quite a while before that to flow through to petrol and diesel use in Australia in a huge way, because there's a difference between stock and flow. The flow of new EVs is very high, but it'll take quite a while until the percentages of the total fleet increases. But in relation to heavy industry, yes, we do need to encourage people to continue their decarbonisation efforts, and our safeguard reforms are expected to save 18 billion litres of diesel between now and 2035. 18 billion litres, and that's over 190 days of diesel supply. So I would argue we are doing that, and we'll keep doing it.
Is the diesel rebate still fit for purpose?
We have no plans to change it.
We've heard no plans before.
Yeah, well, that's a good phrase. It's because that is the situation.
Peter Hobson from Reuters.
Hi, hello, Minister. I wanted to ask also about these proposed data centres in Northern Territory that the developers want to use gas as the source of their electricity. Are you saying that they're essentially dead in the water as proposed? You will make sure that they do not happen? That's question one. And then, is there a kind of minimum level of renewables that you would insist upon? You've just acknowledged that gas might have a role in powering a data centre. Is there a maximum that gas could account for, 5%, 10%, a minimum that renewables would?
Let me put it this way, because I don't want to be sort of appear as too antagonistic to the Northern Territory government, but just a factual statement. If a data centre is proposed to only use gas, it will not meet the minimum national standards, and it won't be allowed to register, and it will not be able to proceed. It's a statement of fact. That's what the majority of Australian jurisdictions think should happen, -2. That's what the Commonwealth thinks should happen. And that's what our legislation will ensure, and will apply across the country.
Even if new legislation is required to make that happen?
Well, we think it is required, and we will do it. I think that's the message. The Prime Minister announced legislation some weeks ago, and I provided a bit more detail around that today about what it will entail. In relation to gas, as I said, we require the new data centres to be powered by renewables, and new renewables, not renewables that was going to be built anyway, new renewables. We do recognise a role for gas in the backup, in the firming options. I think that's pretty sensible. Again, I don't think it'll be called on very often. And the beauty of a gas-fired power station is that when it's turned off, it's zero emissions. And they can be turned off for a long time. I mean, there are gas-fired power stations in Australia that are only turned on a couple of days a year. You can't do that with coal, you can't do that with nuclear, you can do it with gas. And that's why it's an appropriate form for firming and peaking and backup.
So any data centre that says, hey, we're going to use 10% coal-fired, gas-fired...
No, the requirements are renewable energy and then sensible firming arrangements.
Thank you.
Caitlin Rintoul from West Australian.
Thanks for your address, Minister. Back in March, you appointed the Fuel Supply Coordinator, Anthea Harris. It's a gig that came with a $16,000 a week paycheck. How much total compensation has been paid for that position? How long has the contract extended for? And are you satisfied with the approach we took? How can we prevent, and do you have confidence in preventing fuel distribution bottlenecks in the future, particularly in industries like mining, transport and agriculture?
Well, let me work back in the question. Firstly, I do have confidence because we've done a lot as a country over the last few months, and I'm not going to pretend to you it's been easy. I mean, this is a serious fuel crisis internationally, which came our way. I had the view that a calm, sensible, rational approach would see the country through. When politicians were demanding rationing, when experts, I read in newspapers, were saying rationing was inevitable. I remember reading that rationing was inevitable after Easter. It's after Easter. We haven't needed rationing. Why? Because industry and government have worked together. And the Chief Executive of Viva's here today. I mean, he and I have got to know each other very, very well over the last few months. Daily phone calls often, because we're working as one in a team Australia moment. And, I see some criticism of the government today saying we have too much fuel in Australia because of our policies. I will take that criticism. I will own that criticism in the light of what we've been dealing with in the last few months. If you'd said to me on the 28th of February, a few months' time, you'll be criticised for bringing too much fuel into Australia, I'll go, oh, that's okay. because the policies have worked. And that's not been easy. It's been governments and industry working together. In relation to Ms Harris, she's actually employed by the Prime Minister's Department, so I'm not in a position to answer those questions. I welcomed her appointment. It was of assistance in working particularly with the states on some of the detail matters, particularly as we were preparing for any number of eventualities, and states have lots of levers, and a lot of that's worked through at the officials level. Again, I, particularly at the height of the crisis, was talking to state ministers every day, often several times a day. But at the officials level, it was useful to have clear lines of communication between the central agency of government, the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet, and her equivalents at the state level. And it played a role, just along with everything else we did, in ensuring that Australia could get through this crisis.
Thank you.
Next question, Anna Henderson from SBS.
Thanks for your time, Minister. Anna Henderson from SBS World News. Pre-COP has been shaped as sort of agenda setting for COP33, strengthening Australia's clout as president of negotiations come November in Turkey. But how much is COP and its ultimate outcomes for the Pacific being set up to fail if there are next to no world leaders attending? And in hindsight, do you regret agreeing to support such a high-stakes meeting in such a geographically difficult location?
No. Firstly, I talked about the issue, the seriousness and importance of COP for the Pacific, for our Pacific family, which is so important for this government and so important for the country. We've turned around the relations with the Pacific compared to what we inherited, and no small part of that has been climate change generally and the COP bid and the COP negotiations presidency specifically. I've hosted Pacific Islands climate meetings in Australia on several occasions. Sometimes I've been criticised for that. I make, no apologies. It's the right thing to do in our area to work so closely with our friends and colleagues. On pre-COP in particular, there's three important waypoints in the lead up to COP31 in Antalya. There's Palau, the PIF Leaders Summit, which will have a Leaders Assent component. That's important. There's the pre-COP, which is important, and there's a segment in Tuvalu, which is the segment you refer to. Here's the thing. Tuvalu is the least visited country in the world. Of all the nations in the world, the fewest people go to Tuvalu. I'll go on a limb and say I'm probably one of, if not the only person in this room who's been to Tuvalu. I've stood at the most narrow point of Tuvalu and seen the impact of rising seas. Some people deny it. We know it's real. And the very existence of these countries is at stake. So if we can bring an element of the COP process to the Pacific and to Tuvalu with some element of senior representation, which we'll then use to highlight the issues of countries, low-lying atoll countries like Tuvalu and the Marshall Islands and others, to the world's stage, that's a good thing. Now, we haven't announced who's coming.
Are any world leaders coming?
Well, we haven't announced who's coming, but a pre-COP is generally not a world leader event. We've indicated we want to lift its profile. We want to get more senior people there. That's 100% true. It's generally not an event that sometimes even ministers go to. But we want to use it to elevate the Pacific's issues, and regardless of the guest list, which we'll have more to say about closer, I believe we'll be successful in doing so, and that's very important.
Just to be clear, you said in November on the PM program on ABC it would enable you to invite world leaders to make sure the issues were front and centre. So are you disappointed you're not getting the RSVPs?
Well, I understand your question and I appreciate it. There's some way to go between October. I can assure you, pre-COP, including the Tuvalu section, will be very important to elevating the issues of the Pacific. This is something that Turkey and Australia are working closely. My friend and colleague, Minister Karumi, is coming to Fiji and to Tuvalu. That'll be very important to have, both myself as President of COP negotiations and Murat as President of COP31 there. We'll have other senior representation. It'll be important. It'll be key, an unparalleled opportunity to raise the issues of the Pacific. I've been to several COPs. The issues of the Pacific have not been front and centre. That's the unvarnished truth. We think, at least at this COP, they should be, and they will be.
Thank you.
Next question, Josh Butler from The Guardian.
Thanks, Minister, for your address. Stood on the microphone there. Thanks for your address. I also want to ask about the data centres. Your Queensland colleague, after the last Energy Ministers' meeting, said we will not support underdeveloped ideas that hand increased power to Canberra at the expense of Queenslanders on that renewables issue. How do you think your colleagues in Queensland and the NT will react when you put through this legislation that would essentially override what their state's position is? And I guess more broadly, data centre industry is saying they need certainty for this investment. You know, you've got states, some states, like you say, two, state and territory saying one thing, federal government, other states saying another thing. This legislation might not be through until early, mid next year. Are you concerned that's a disincentive for some of this large investment?
No, I think they'll disagree. You asked me what I think their reaction will be. I think they'll disagree. They've already disagreed with us. Not every minister is going to agree about everything all the time. We have a difference of view. We think that data centre investment in Australia, which we welcome, must be in our national interest, in the interest of bill payers and consumers. I think most Queenslanders would agree with that. I think most Queenslanders would say, if there's some data centre investment in Australia, that's not a bad thing, but make sure it works in our national interest. Now, so far, most of the pipeline is not in Queensland. So far, most of the pipeline's in Sydney and Melbourne, to be frank. But we want Queensland to be part of it. I've been very clear. We will legislate as a Commonwealth. The Constitution is clear about the power of Commonwealth legislation. I respectfully disagree with Queensland and the Northern Territory, and I think bill payers would agree with the Commonwealth. And to your question about certainty, the best way of ensuring certainty is clear, consistent Commonwealth legislation.
Melissa Code from the Mandarin.
Hi Minister, Melissa Code from the Mandarin. Building and running an energy system is fundamentally different to administering a market surrounding one. At the recent ALP conference, Labor endorsed a larger role for public construction and ownership of energy assets. What does the Commonwealth need to do to rebuild capacity to deliver on this policy direction?
Well, firstly, yes, the National Conference reinforced the role of what we see as the public sector. I think there's other parts of that resolution which made clear it wouldn't crowd out private sector investment, but would be calibrated to crowd in more investment, as I think is happening at various state levels. It's happening at the Commonwealth level with the CFC and Snowy, our two primary investment mechanisms in new renewable generation, and they'll continue in that, and we'll always look for opportunities for Snowy and CFC. In particular, alongside our other important agencies to help crowd in investment. To your question about capability, well, I mean, I've got to say in my 4 years as Minister, I've been extraordinarily well served by a first-class department, created from scratch. As you know, you don't create a new Department of State every day. As I understand, it's happened twice in recent decades, and both times there's been a Department of Climate Change and Energy. We created a new Department of State. You know, there are MOG changes, Ministerial Government changes after every election, but actually a brand new Department of State from scratch is pretty rare. We've done that, and under Secretaries Fredericks and Kaiser, that capability has been lifted, and they have played an important role. Together with our other expert agencies, I mean, the CFC and ARENA are world-class agencies. They're internationally respected. AEMO is regarded as one of, if not the best, market operator in the world. Snowy is doing a very difficult job and doing it well. So I think we are well served as a country. Can we always invest more in capability? Sure. But I wouldn't want to let this opportunity go without shouting out the fact that the progress the country's made over the last 4 years, sure, government policy, you expect to say, very important. But a government alone, a minister alone, can't do it all. We've been particularly well served, the country has, by our expertise in the Commonwealth Government.
Thanks.
Next question, Michael De Percy from Spectator Australia.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you, Mr. Bowen. You wrote on Facebook that wholesale electricity prices have fallen 47% in the last 12 months. Yet in many cases, retail supply charges have actually increased and time of use windows have changed, making any consumer price changes minimal and less transparent. Minister, who is actually benefiting from the halving of wholesale electricity prices?
It'll take time for those wholesale price falls to fully pass through the Australian people, and we need to keep them going. And yes, some companies have increased their fixed charges as they reduce their kilowatt-hour charge. Now, for many consumers, they'll still see reductions because their energy use is higher than their fixed charge, but not for all. As you know, I wrote to the Australian Energy Regulator and the ACCC to ensure that the rules were properly being followed, and those investigations, I'm sure, have been very important. We are seeing more Australians benefit, some through the solar share offer, some through cheaper home batteries, and wholesale prices falling. Now, if you're asking me, is wholesale prices enough? No, it's not. But our wholesale price falls the absolute essential starting point? Absolutely. I mean, tell me how we're going to see retail prices come down if wholesale prices aren't coming down. They're not. Our policies see wholesale prices coming down. The alternative would see them going up because they'd have less of the cheapest form of energy renewable, more of the most expensive form of energy and most unreliable. In Australia at the moment, coal, with some sort of fantasy plan for nuclear, which is the most expensive form of energy available in the world and the slowest to roll out. That is not the answer. The answer is to keep on going with the policies that have had some success in reducing wholesale prices, more to do to see it flow through to Australians, you betcha. And we'll do that.
But given the amount of investment, public investment in the energy infrastructure, at what point would you consider regulating for return of investment, like under the old state models?
Well, there are regulations that applies to some of the players in our energy system, the regulated monopolies. That's quite appropriate. Am I planning to extend that? No. Have we worked to ensure that the rules operate much more in the interest of consumers by abolishing sneaky price rises and ensuring the most vulnerable customers in particular put on the cheapest rates? Yes. Will we continue to do those sorts of things? Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you see a fundamental unfairness that someone with solar panels pays less for the service charges than someone without, even though they both need the poles and wires and so on sitting there?
Look, I mean, those people who've invested in their own consumer energy resources have also invested, off their own account. So they're helping the grid as well. By the same token, they're reducing the prices for everyone else as well. So I think you've got to see it as a holistic question.
Joseph Albright-Palmer from News Corp.
Thanks, Minister, for your address. Just on pre-COP, diplomats have told me that really the reason they're not looking to send leaders is because communication about what's actually on the agenda hasn't really been communicated too clearly. They're basically worried that it won't be a summit of substance. You identify just how important climate is for our Pacific neighbours who are on the front lines of the crisis. If this pre-COP is just a show, will it really advance our diplomatic goals in the region?
Well, it's not just a show. That's the answer. In all seriousness, we will ensure, working with Turkey, and we're utterly on the same page, this is a COP of substantial outcomes. Now, not the answer to all the world's problems, but a substantial step forward. Now, in relation to the Pacific, as I said, we've hosted the Pacific ministers as recently as, I think, 2 weeks ago in Sydney, talked about the pre-COP agenda and what we'll do to make progress on the issues of access to finance for them. There's now quite a lot of climate finance available and adaptation finance available around the world, but small island developing states struggle to get it. So we want to see progress there. We want to see the issue of oceans more deeply integrated into the COP process. That's of vital importance to the Pacific. So these are the sorts of issues that without the approach we're taking, Australia, Turkey and the Pacific working together, which in my time in COPs have not been at the top of the agenda. Far from it. And, and I understand why, because every COP presidency has its own priorities, and these are not been the priorities of those COP presidencies that have come before us, before Turkey and Australia. This has been very important for our diplomatic relations across the Pacific already, the bid, and having such deep engagement with the Pacific countries on the COP process. The fact that, I've hosted the Pacific climate ministers in Australia so often. We have a Pacific climate ministers WhatsApp group, which is very active. This didn't happen under the previous government. And, when you add that to the progress we've made in our treaties and unions, and alliances, PNG, Tuvalu, Vanuatu, Fiji, this doesn't happen by accident. And it's all part of the same journey and the same national mission. And if you think the Australian government would say, listen, we'd like to have these alliances and treaties with you, and we don't want you to do them with other countries, but by the way, we don't care about your most existential issue. We're not going to do more on climate change. That is not going to be a successful conversation. And I don't think our political opponents have quite thought that through. That's the approach they tried for 10 years, and it didn't work. They didn't get the sorts of alliances, treaties, and arrangements we've successfully negotiated with so many Pacific countries for a reason. You can't ignore the Pacific on such a fundamental issue as climate change and expect to be their diplomatic partner of choice.
Are you not concerned that lack of leaders attending?
Well, as I said, the pre-COP is in October. It'll be a successful pre-COP. It's not successful just because the invitation list. Who's there is important, but the agenda is also important, and how we use it to elevate issues of the Pacific to the world stage is vital as well.
Thank you.
Squeeze in Noah Second from AAP.
Thank you. Hopefully it's quick and good. One of the announcements...
That's up to you, mate.
One of the announcements we've seen in recent days was a $30 million grant program for grid sustainability into the future, and looking at innovations in Australia, talking about batteries on transmission...
Talk about the grid enhancing technologies program.
Yes.
Yep.
Looking at this funding and what they're aiming to achieve, has this come in time to actually to reach the emissions targets of 2035, or are these for long-term 2050 targets?
Well, I think some of the things in there could well play a role over the next decade. Some of them are, they need support because they're early-stage technologies. I will say this, Noah, that program took longer to roll out than I would have liked, only because it was so massively oversubscribed. We had so many more applications for that program of great technologies, most of which could have been successfully funded, would have been worthy, but of course that's not how a budgeted program works. You've got to find them most worthy, and that took us some time. But I see that as a sign of strength, that there's so much good innovation and thinking and entrepreneurship going about how we use the grid better and smarter in Australia. And some of it might avoid, future transmission or distribution lines being necessary if you use the existing grid smarter. If you take the revolution in EVs to its maximum potential, every EV is a battery on wheels, and many Australians want to turn that battery on wheels into something which will help them power their homes and the grid. And we're making some progress on that. Our Vehicle to Grid program is hugely popular with households. It's small, early days, but hugely popular. That shows, again, to the substance of my speech, that Australian households are on this journey. They are enthusiastically embracing it. Despite all the noise and the denial, they're just getting on with it. And the sorts of programs that are funded under the Grid Enhancing Technologies program, I hope and expect some of them will play a role in helping us by 2035.
Thank you.
A nod to the people you mentioned in Tarneet, Werribee, Kellyville. You say they're taking up schemes including EVs. Plenty in those areas are still driving around internal combustion engines, and they'd be saying, we're paying the full excise again now. EV users are not paying for roads. We've heard Jim Chalmers say it's an idea whose time has come, a road user charge. It was expected perhaps to be in the last budget. Will it be in place by the next budget?
Well, Tom, my view about a road user charge has been consistent all the way through, same as my public comments. I think a road user charge is something that Australia should be working towards. It's got to be done right. It's got to be done carefully. And that includes timing. It's a very big undertaking. It should not be rushed unnecessarily. The Treasurer and I are of one mind on that. That's why it wasn't in the budget, because it needs more work. It's a conversation that we'll continue to have. No one, I haven't found anyone who really disagrees with that. No one in the EV industry says we oppose a road user charge ever. They say do it right, plan it well, get all the designs right, and when the time is right, it'll be an important part of ensuring that the transport revolution in Australia, which is, can't be turned back, despite the best wishes of some in Canberra, in Parliament House, can't be turned back because Australian people are well on the journey. We've got to make sure it works, and part of that is a sensible, longer-term discussion about the impacts on government revenue, state and federal, including a road user charge. It's important it happens, but it's important to be done right. It's important it's not rushed in a way which threatens getting it right.
We've gone a little over. I went for forgiveness rather than permission on that, but thank you for extending the questions to the press pack. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the Minister, Chris Bowen. Here you go, mate. You got another one of these?